Tilly's first. Tilly's first. Hi, Tilly. Teresa Trumbull. Hi, Danielle. Hope you're doing well. Alex. Hey, haven't seen you in a while. Teresa. Liz the Wiz is back. Kaylee. Rachel. Tilly, you win. Yes, you do. Zainab Siaki. Hey, William. Jen Ben Collins. Found some ragu. I found some ragu music. This is Harry Potter reading, or no, Conk's Corner. Conk's Corner with John Reedsley. That's me, John Reedsley. Nathan's 10th. Good job. Night Owl Nerd, good evening. Good evening, everybody. Okay, so this is Conk's Corner with John Reedsley. What I'm doing is I'm reading Harry Potter every single day for an hour. We're currently on the second book. I'm really getting to the series because I have not read these yet. I have not read any of the books. I've only seen 2 or 3 of the movies. Don't remember anything from them. I read all the comments afterwards, so please, no spoilers, no hints or indications of what's coming. Yesterday, some people were just discussing future books and saying, this is my favorite, this one sucks and is boring, or this one has a lot of teenage drama. Don't want to know that. Do not want to know that. Please, don't discuss that. I'll leave a Q&A at the end for 5 minutes. This is Dexter, my dog. This is Mark, my trusty Harry Potter advisor. There he is. And I save all of these on YouTube, so if you haven't seen any of these or want to catch up, just go to the link in my bio on Instagram, and you will get to all the rest of the videos. So, we are currently on page 29 of this book, if you're following along. Harry has again been mishandled by Uncle Vernon and the family, and there has been a weird creature, Dobby, who has been bashing his own head, trying to tell Harry something, but didn't tell him anything. He just said, don't go back to Hogwarts. So naturally, Harry decides to go to Hogwarts, into the danger. He got picked up by Ron Weasley and his 2 brothers in a flying car. They've got the owl in there, and I guess they're heading to Hogwarts. That's what I'm guessing. So we'll see where all this goes. Okay, page 29, top of the page. Harry's currently speaking. But your dad, this car. Fred laughed. Yeah, Dad's mad about everything to do with muggles. Our shed's full of muggle stuff. He takes it apart, puts spells on it, and puts it back together again. If he raided our house, he'd have to put himself straight under arrest. It drives Mum mad. That's the main road, said George, peering down through the windscreen. We'll be there in 10 minutes. Just as well. It's getting light. A faint pinkish glow was visible along the horizon to the east. Fred brought the car lower, and Harry saw a dark patchwork of fields and clumps of trees. We're a little way outside the village, said George. Ottery Street Catchpole. Lower and lower went the flying car. The edge of a brilliant red sun was now gleaming through the trees. Touchdown, said Fred, as with a slight bump they hit the ground. They had landed next to a tumble-down garage in a small yard, and Harry looked out for the first time at Ron's house. It looked as though it had once been a large stone pigsty, but extra rooms had been added here and there, until it was several stories high, and so crooked it looked as though it was held up by magic, which Harry reminded himself it probably was. 4 or 5 chimneys were perched on top of the red roof. A lopsided sign stuck in the ground near the entrance read, "The Burrow." Burrow, right? How do you pronounce that word?
Burrow?
Burrow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hey, I grew up in Germany, Australia. Sometimes I don't know how words work. Sue me. Sue me! 4 or 5 chimneys were perched on top of the red roof. A lopsided sign stuck in the ground near the entrance read, "The Burrow." Round the front door lay a jumble of Wellington books and a very rusty cauldron. Several fat brown chickens were pecking their way around the yard. It's not much, said Ron. It's brilliant, said Harry happily, thinking of Privet Drive. They got out of the car. Now, we'll go upstairs really quietly, said Fred, and wait for Mum to call us for breakfast. Then, Ron, you come bounding downstairs going, Mum, look who turned up in the night. and she'll be all pleased to see Harry, and no one need ever know we flew the car." "Right," said Ron. "Come on, Harry. I sleep at the..." Ron had gone a nasty greenish color, his eyes fixed on the house. The other three wheeled around. Mrs. Weasley was marching across the yard, scattering chickens, and for a short, plump, kind-faced woman, it was remarkable how much she looked like a saber-toothed tiger. I've done her voice a few times, but only at the very beginning and end of the last book. So again, throw some, I want to give her more refinement. Throw some adjectives my way for her, and I'll figure out a voice for her. "Ah," said Fred. "Oh dear," said George. Mrs. Weasley came to a halt in front of them, her hands on her hips, staring from one guilty face to the next. She was wearing a flowered apron with a wand sticking out of a pocket. "So," she said. "Any adjectives?" "Sweet, heart-kinded." "Okay." "So," she said. "Morning, Mum," said George, in what he clearly thought was a jaunty, winning voice. "Have you any idea how worried I've been?" said Mrs. Weasley in a deadly whisper. "Have you any idea how worried I've been?" said Mrs. Weasley in a deadly whisper. "Sorry, Mum, but see, we had to..." All three of Mrs. Weasley's sons were taller than she was, but they cowered as her rage broke over them. "A sweet mama bear, don't mess with her family." "Bed's empty! No note! Car gone! Could have crashed! Out of my mind with worry! Did you care? Never! As long as I've lived! As long as I've lived! You wait until your father gets home! We never had trouble like this from Bill or Charlie or Percy." "Perfect Percy," muttered Fred. "You could do with taking a leaf out of Percy's book," yelled Mrs. Weasley, prodding a finger in Fred's chest. Something like that. "You could have died. You could have been seen. You could have lost your father his job." It seemed to go on for hours. Mrs. Weasley had shouted herself hoarse before she turned on Harry, who backed away. "I'm very pleased to see you, Harry, dear," she said. Come in and have some breakfast." She turned and walked back into the house, and Harry, after a nervous glance at Ron, who nodded encouragingly, followed her. Perfect. It works out like she raged at her kids. I can't read that paragraph right now. Sorry. She turned and walked back into the house, and Harry, after a nervous glance at Ron, who nodded encouragingly, followed her. The kitchen was small and rather cramped. There was a scrubbed wooden table and chairs in the middle, and Harry sat down on the edge of his seat, looking around. He had never been in a wizard house before. The clock on the wall opposite him had only one hand and no numbers at all. Written around the edges were things like "time to make tea," "time to feed the chickens," and "you're late." Oh no! Books were stacked 3 deep on the mantelpiece. Books with titles like "Charm Your Own Cheese." And "Hey, Cheese, how you doing?" Enchantments in Baking, and 1-minute feasts. It's magic! And unless Harry's ears were deceiving him, the old radio next to the sink had just announced that coming up was Witching Hour with the popular singing sorceress Celestina Warbeck. Mrs. Weasley was clattering around, cooking breakfast a little haphazardly, throwing dirty looks at her sons as she threw sausages into the frying pan. Every now and then she muttered things like, Don't know what you were thinking of, and never would have believed it." "I don't blame you, dear," she assured Harry, tipping 8 or 9 sausages onto his plate. "Harry and I have been worried about you too. Just last night we were saying we'd come and get you ourselves, if you hadn't written back to Ron by Friday. But really," she was now adding 3 fried eggs to his plate, "flying an illegal car halfway across the country? Anyone could have seen you." She flicked her wand casually at the washing up in the sink, which began to clean itself, clinking gently in the background. "It was cloudy, Mum," said Fred. "You keep your mouth closed while you're eating," Mrs. Weasley snapped. "They were starving him, Mum. And you," said Mrs. Weasley, but it was with a slightly softened expression that she started cutting Harry bread and buttering it for him. At that moment, there was a diversion in the form of a small, red-headed figure in a long nightdress, who appeared in the kitchen. "Oh no, Ginny, Oh no, my worst voice.
It's so bad.
It's so bad. Okay, little kid. Oh no, I'm gonna have to do a lot of her. Okay, give a small squeal and ran out again. Ginny, said Ron in an undertone to Harry, my sister. She's been talking about you all summer. Yeah, she'll be wanting your autograph, Harry, grinned Fred. But he caught his mother's eye and bent his face over his plate without another word. Nothing more was said until all 4 plates were clean, which took a surprisingly short time. Blimey, I'm tired, yawned Fred, setting down his knife and fork at last. I think I'll go to bed and... You will not, snapped Mrs. Weasley. It's your own fault. You've been up all night. You're going to denome the garden for me. They're getting completely out of hand again. Oh, Mom, and you two, she said, glaring at Ron and Fred. You can go up to bed, dear, she added to Harry. You didn't ask them to fly that wretched car. But Harry, who felt wide awake, said quickly, I'll help Ron. I've never seen a denoming. That's very sweet of you, dear, but it's dull work, said Mrs. Weasley. Now, let's see what Lockhart's got to say on the subject. And she pulled a heavy book from the stack on the mantelpiece. George groaned. Mum, we know how to denome a garden. Harry looked at the cover of Mrs. Weasley's book. Written across it in fancy gold letters were the words, Gilderoy Lockhart's Guide to Household Pests. There was a big photograph on the front of a very good-looking wizard with wavy blonde hair and bright blue eyes. Gilderoy Lockhart gets a fancy shout-out. As always, in the wizarding world, the photograph was moving. The wizard, who Harry supposed was Gilderoy Lockhart, kept winking cheekily up at them all. Mrs. Weasley beamed down at him. Oh, he is marvelous, she said. He knows his household pests. All right. It's a wonderful book. Mum fancies him, said Fred in a very audible whisper. Don't be ridiculous, Fred, said Mrs. Weasley, her cheeks rather pink. All right. If you think you know better than Lockhart, you can go and get on with it. And woe betide you if there's a single gnome in that garden when I come out to inspect it. Yawning and grumbling, the Weasleys slouched outside with Harry behind them. The garden was large and, in Harry's eyes, exactly what a garden should be. The Dursleys wouldn't have liked it. There were plenty of weeds, and the grass needed cutting. But there were gnarled trees all around the walls, plants Harry had never seen spilling from every flower bed, and a big green pond full of frogs. Muggles have garden gnomes too, you know, Harry told Ron as they crossed the lawn. Yeah, I've seen those things. They think are gnomes, said Ron, bent double with his head in a peony bush. Peony. Oh, that's how you spell peony. Peony in a peony bush. Get those gnomes out of that peony bush. Said Ron, bent double with his head in a peony bush. Like fat little Father Christmases with fishing rods. There was a violent scuffling noise. The peony bush shuddered, and Ron straightened up. This is a gnome, he said grimly. Oh, a gnome. Get off me! Get off me! Squealed the gnome. It was certainly nothing like Father Christmas. It was small and leathery looking, with a large, knobbly, bald head exactly like a potato. Ron held it at arm's length as it kicked out at him with its horny little feet. He grasped it around the ankles and turned it upside down. This is what you have to do, he said. He raised the gnome above his head. Get off me! And started to swing it in a great circles like a lasso. Seeing the shocked look on Harry's face, Ron added, Oh, it doesn't hurt them. You've just got to make them really dizzy so they can't find their way back to the gnome holes. Oh, man. He let go of the gnome's ankles. It flew 20 feet into the air and landed with a thud in the field over the hedge. Pitiful, said Fred. I bet I can get mine beyond that stump. Harry learned quickly not to feel sorry for the gnomes. He decided just to drop the first one he caught over the hedge, but the gnome, sensing weakness, sank its razor-sharp teeth into Harry's finger, and he had a hard job shaking it off until... Wow, Harry, that must have been 50 feet. The air was soon thick with flying gnomes. See, they're not too bright, said George, seizing 5 or 6 gnomes at once. The moment they know the denoming's going on, they storm up to have a look. You'd think they'd have learned by now just to stay put. Soon, the crowd of gnomes in the field started walking away in a straggling line, their little shoulders hunched. "They'll be back," said Ron, as they watched the gnomes disappearing into the hedge on the other side of the field. "They love it here. Dad's too soft with them. He thinks they're funny." Just then, the front door slammed. "He's back," said George. "Dad's home." They hurried through the garden and back into the house. Give me some adjectives for Mr. Weasley, please, because he's for sure going to be saying something. So, however you would describe Mr. Weasley. Mr. Weasley was slumped in a kitchen chair with his glasses off and his eyes closed. He was a thin man, going bald, but the little hair he had was as red as any of his children's. He was wearing long green robes, which were dusty and travel-worn. So how would you describe him?
I would say that he's like a hard-working guy. He could probably be kind of tired.
Oh,
but
yeah.
he's like kind and he's
enthusiastic, very fatherly, jovial.
Yeah,
Bumbling. Yeah. Oh, okay. "Oh, what a night," he mumbled, groping for the teapot as they all sat around him. "9 maids! 9! And old Mundungus Fletcher tried to put a hex on me when I had my back turned." Something like that? Different?
Yeah.
Gets excited about Muggle. Cheerful, excitable. Okay. Cheerful, excitable. Mumbly. Okay. Something like that. Gentle, curious, sweet, cheerful, down to earth. Kindly. Okay. Mr. Weasley took a long gulp of tea and sighed. "Find anything, Dad?" said Fred eagerly. All I got were All I got were a few shrinking door keys and a biting kettle," yawned Mr. Weasley. "There was some pretty nasty stuff that wasn't my department, though. Mortlake was taken away for questioning about some extremely odd ferrets. But that's the Committee on Experimental Charms, thank goodness." Something like that?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, something like that. "Why would anyone bother making door keys shrink?" said George. "Just muggle baiting," sighed Mr. Weasley. "Sell them a key that keeps shrinking to nothing so they can never find it when they need it. Of course, it's very hard to convict anyone because no muggle would admire their key keeps shrinking. They'll insist they just keep losing it. Bless them. They'll get to any lengths to ignore magic, even if it's staring them in the face. But the things our lot have taken to enchanting, you wouldn't believe. Like like cars, for instance." Mrs. Weasley had appeared, holding a long poker-like sword. Mr. Weasley's eyes jerked open. He stared guiltily at his wife. "Cars, Molly, dear?" "Yes, Arthur, cars," said Mrs. Weasley, her eyes flashing. "Imagine a wizard buying a rusty old car and telling his wife all he wanted to do with it was take it apart to see how it worked, while really he was enchanting it to make it fly." Mr. Weasley blinked. "Well, dear, I think you'll find that he would be quite within the law to do that." Oh, wait, that's him. "Well, dear, I think you'll find that he would be quite within the law to do that, even if he maybe would have done better to tell his wife the truth. There's a loophole in the law. You'll find as long as he wasn't intending to fly the car, the fact that the car could fly wouldn't..." "Arthur Weasley, you made sure there was a loophole when you wrote the law," shouted Mrs. Weasley, "just so you could carry on tinkering with all that muggle rubbish in your shed. And for your information, Harry arrived this morning in the car you weren't intending to fly." "Harry?" said Mr. Weasley blankly. "Harry who?" He looked around. Saw Harry and jumped. Good Lord. Is it Harry Potter? Very pleased to meet you. Ron's told us so much about..." "Your sons flew that car to Harry's house and back last night," shouted Mrs. Weasley. "What have you got to say about that, eh?" Did you really?" said Mr. Weasley eagerly. "Did it go all right? I mean," he faltered, as sparks flew from Mrs. Weasley's eyes. That was very wrong, boys. Very wrong indeed." "Let's leave them to it," Ron muttered to Harry, as Mrs. Weasley swelled like a bullfrog. "Come on, I'll show you my bedroom." They slipped out of the kitchen and down a narrow passageway to an uneven staircase, which zigzagged its way up through the house. On the third landing, a door stood ajar. Harry just caught sight of a pair of bright brown eyes staring at him before it closed with a snap. "Dobby?" "Oh, Ginny." I thought it was Ginny for some... Dobby. Ginny, said Ron, you don't know how weird it is for her to be this shy. She never shuts up normally. They climbed 2 flights until they reached a door with peeling paint and a small plaque on it, saying, Ronald's room. Thank you, Tasha. Harry stepped in, his head almost touching the sloping ceiling, and blinked. It was like walking into a furnace. Nearly everything in Ron's room seemed to be a violent shade of orange. The bedspread, the walls, even the ceiling. Then Harry realized that Ron had covered nearly every inch of the shabby wallpaper with posters of the same 7 witches and wizards, all wearing bright orange robe, carrying broomsticks, and waving energetically. Your Quidditch team, said Harry. The Chudley Cannons, said Ron, pointing at the orange-red bedspread, which was emblazoned with 2 giant black C's and a speeding cannonball. 9th in the league. Ron's school spellbooks were stacked untidily in a corner, next to a pile of comics which all seemed to feature the adventures of Martin Miggs, the Mad Muggle. Ron's a nerd! Ron's a big nerd. Ginny, Donny, same. Where were we? Ron's magic wand was lying on top of a fish tank full of frog spawn on the windowsill, next to his fat grey rat, Scabbers, who was snoozing in a patch of sun. Harry stepped over a pack of self-shuffling playing cards on the floor and looked out of the tiny window. In the field far below, he could see a gang of gnomes sneaking one by one through the Weasley's hedge. What's the point of denoming it if they're just going to creep back that evening? What's the point? I also want to know what their lives are like. I mean, are they dig into the ground like moles, I'm guessing, or do they just stand around like actual gnomes? Do they live in the ground, and then what do they eat? Rats? Then he turned to look at Ron, who was watching him almost nervously, as though waiting for his opinion. It's a bit small, said Ron quickly. Not like that room you had with the Muggles. And I'm right underneath the ghoul in the attic. He's always banging on the pipes and groaning. What? Kill me! Release me from this prison! But Harry, grinning widely, said, This is the best house I've ever been in. Ron's ears went pink. Chapter 4. At Flourish and Blots. Life at the Burrow was as different as possible from life in Privet Drive. I like that they switched over to this location now, because I don't think I would have been too into, 4 chapters of being at the Dursleys. I don't think that would have been as fun. It's a nice change of place. Also, it surprised me they didn't go right to Hogwarts, so this is good. I'm liking this. At Flourish and Blots. Life at the Burrow was as different as possible from life in Privet Drive. The Dursleys liked everything neat and ordered. The Weasleys' house burst with the strange and unexpected. Harry got a shock the first time he looked in the mirror over the kitchen mantelpiece, and it shouted, Tuck your shirt in, Scruffy! I guess, oh wait, how would a mirror sound? Glass and aggressive. Tuck your shirt in, nah. Tuck your shirt in, Scruffy! I don't know, how does glass sound? It's sharp, but it's also see-through. I don't know. The ghoul in the attic howled and dropped pipes whenever he felt things were getting too quiet. Are you guys still there? Release me from this hell! And small explosions from Fred and George's bedroom were considered perfectly normal. What Harry found most unusual about life at Ron's, however, wasn't the talking mirror or the clanking ghoul. It was the fact that everybody there seemed to like him. Mrs. Weasley fussed over the state of his socks and tried to force him to eat 4th helpings at every meal. Oh, that's very Russian. I come from a Russian-German background, and they're probably not Russian, but it feels like a Russian family to me. Mr. Weasley liked Harry to sit next to him at the dinner table, so that he could bombard him with questions about life with Muggles, asking him to explain how things like plugs and the postal service worked. Okay, so what I'm getting is they've just grown up with magic all around them. They've never had to use plugs in the wall because they can generate their own electricity. They've never had to use money because they can just make food appear, I guess. They've never had to deal with the post service because they sent everything per owl. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Fascinating, he would say, as Harry talked him through using a telephone. Ingenious, really. How many ways muggles have found of getting along without magic. Harry heard from Hogwarts one sunny morning, about a week after he had arrived at the Burrow. He and Ron went down to breakfast to find Mr. and Mrs. Weasley and Ginny already sitting at the kitchen table. Drink. As Jordan said yesterday, this is pure vodka. The moment she saw Harry, Ginny accidentally knocked her porridge bowl to the floor with a loud clatter. What is up with her? Ginny seemed very prone to knocking things over whenever Harry entered a room. She dived under the table to retrieve the bowl and emerged with her face glowing like the setting sun. Pretending he hadn't noticed this, Harry sat down and took the toast Mrs. Weasley offered him. Letters from school, said Mr. Weasley, passing Harry and Ron identical envelopes of yellowish parchment, addressed in green ink. Dumbledore already knows you're here, Harry. Doesn't miss a trick, that man. You two've got them too, he added, as Fred and George ambled in, still in their pajamas. For a few minutes there was silence as they all read their letters. Harry told him to catch the Hogwarts Express, as usual, from King's Cross Station on September the 1st. There was also a list of the new books he'd need for the coming year. Here's a list of books. Second-year students will require The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2, by Miranda Goshock. Break with a Banshee, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Gadding with Ghouls, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Holidays with Hags, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Travels with Trolls, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Voyages with Vampires, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Wandering with Werewolves, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Yeah, with a Yeti, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Fred, who had finished his own list, peered over at Harry's. Fred, you've been told to get all Lockhart's books too, he said. The new defense against the dark arts teacher must be a fan. Bet it's a witch. At this point, Fred caught his mother's eye and quickly busied himself with the marmalade. That lot won't come cheap, said George, with a quick look at his parents. Lockhart's books are really expensive. Well, we'll manage, said Mrs. Weasley, but she looked around. I expect we'll be able to pick up a lot of Ginny's things second-hand. Oh, are you starting at Hogwarts this year? Oh, are you starting at Hogwarts this year? Harry asked Ginny. She nodded, blushing to the roots of her flaming hair. Oh, she's got a little crush, I think. Yeah, she's got a little crush on Harry. How old is she? 10. She's going to Hogwarts next year, so she must be 10.
She's going this year. She's going to be first year while Harry's in second.
Oh, so she's 11, Harry's 12 now.
Yes.
Yeah. So she's a year younger.
Or Harry's... Yeah.
Yeah, back in that time, a year is a huge difference. I don't know if they'll get together. Because it's a year apart. I don't know, Ginny. Well, I'm assuming it's a crush. Who knows? She nodded, blushing to the roots, but it seems like it, blushing to the roots of her flaming hair, and put her elbow in the butter dish. Fortunately, no one saw this except Harry, because just then, Ron's elder brother Percy walked in. Oh, here he is. He was already dressed, his Hogwarts prefect badge pinned to his knitted tank top. Morning, all, said Percy briskly. Lovely day. Lovely day. He sat down in the only remaining chair, but leapt up again almost immediately, pulling from underneath him a molting grey feather duster. At least that was what Harry thought it was, until he saw that it was breathing. Errol, said Ron, taking the limp owl from Percy and extracting a letter from under its wing. Finally, he's got Hermione's answer. I wrote to her saying we were going to try and rescue you from the Dursleys. He carried Errol to a perch just inside the back door and tried to stand him on it, but Errol flopped straight off again. So Ron lay him on the draining board instead, muttering, "Pathetic, pathetic." Then he ripped open Hermione's letter and read it out loud. So wait, who's reading this? Ron lay on. He carried Errol. So this is Percy. Yes, sorry. Wait, one second. He ripped open. This is Ron. My bad. It's confusing sometimes. Dear Ron and Harry, if you're there, I hope everything. Dear Ron and Harry, if you're there, I hope everything went all right and that Harry is okay. And that you didn't do anything illegal to get him out, Ron, because that would get Harry in trouble too. I've been really worried. And if Harry is all right, will you please let me know at once? But perhaps it would be better if you used a different owl, because I think another delivery might finish your one off. I'm very busy with school work, of course. How can she be? How can she be? Said Ron in horror. We're on holiday. And we're going to London next Wednesday to buy my new books. Why don't we meet in Diagon Alley? Let me know what's happening as soon as you can. Love from Hermione. Sweet Hermione. Well, that fits in nicely. We can go and get all your things then too, said Mrs. Weasley, starting to clear the table. What are you all up to today? Harry, Ron, Fred, and George were planning to go up the hill to a small paddock the Weasleys owned. What's a paddock?
A paddock?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
If anybody knows what a paddock is, let me know. It was surrounded by trees that blocked it from view of the village below, meaning that they could practice Quidditch there, as long as they didn't fly too high. They couldn't use real Quidditch balls, which would have been hard to explain if they had escaped and flown away over the village. Instead, they threw apples for each other to catch. They took it in turns to ride Harry's Nimbus 2000, which was easily the best broom. Ron's old shooting star was often outstripped by passing butterflies, like a stable, a field. A field or a stable? Which one is it?
A pen, a field, and a stable.
Oh, okay. 5 minutes later, they were marching up the hill, broomsticks over their shoulders. They had asked Percy if he wanted to join them, but he had said he was busy. Harry had only seen Percy at mealtime so far. He stayed shut in his room the rest of the time. Wish I knew what he was up to, said Fred, frowning. He's not himself. His exam results came the day before you did. 12 OWLs, and he hardly gloated at all. Ordinary wizarding levels, George explained, seeing Harry's puzzle book. Bill got 12 too. If we're not careful, we'll have another head boy in the family. I don't think I could stand the shame. Bill was the oldest Weasley brother. Oh, there's another brother?
Mm-hmm.
What the heck? Man, their parents went at it like rabbits.
Oh, God.
Can't keep their hands off each other, huh?
It's owls, not OWLs.
Oh, it said OWLs, though.
Yeah, that's what it stands for.
Yeah, but it said OW.
They just call them owls. They just call them the owls.
Okay, the owls. Okay, gotcha. Bill was the oldest Weasley brother. He and the next brother, Charlie, had already left Hogwarts. Harry had never met either of them, but knew that Charlie was in Romania studying dragons and Bill in Egypt working for the Wizards' Bank, Gringotts. Oh yeah, Charlie and Bill. Holy smokes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 kids, right?
No, 7. Bill, Charlie, Percy, Fred, George.
Oh my
Ron,
gosh,
Ginny.
yeah, Percy too. Wow. And Ginny is gonna be like 6 older brothers. Holy. Don't know how Mum and Dad are going to afford all our school stuff this year, said George after a while. 5 sets of Lockhart books, and Ginny needs robes and a wand and everything. Harry said nothing. He felt a bit awkward. Stored in an underground vault at Gringotts in London was a small fortune that his parents had left him. Of course, it was only in the wizarding world that he had money. You couldn't use galleons, sickles, and nuts in muggle shops. He had never mentioned his Gringotts bank account to the Dursleys. He didn't think their horror of anything connected with magic would stretch to a large pile of gold. Mrs. Weasley woke them all early the following Wednesday. After a quick half a dozen bacon sandwiches, that sounds so good, each, they pulled on their coats, and Mrs. Weasley took a flower pot off the kitchen mantelpiece and peered inside. "We're running low, Arthur," she said. "We'll have to buy some more today." "Oh well, guests first. After you, Harry dear." And she offered him a flower pot. Harry stared at them all, watching him. "What am I supposed to do?" he stammered. "He's never really travelled by floo powder," said Ron suddenly. "Sorry, Harry, I forgot." "Never?" said Mrs. Weasley. But how did you get to Diagon Alley to buy your school things last year?" "I went on underground." "Really?" said Mr. Weasley eagerly. "Were there escapators?" "Escapators? Were there escapators?" "Oh, exactly." "Not now, Arthur," said Mrs. Weasley. "Floo powder's a lot quicker, dear, but goodness me, if you've never used it before. He'll be all right, Mum, said Fred. Harry, watch us first. He took a pinch of glittering powder out of the flower pot, stepped up to the fire, and threw the powder into the flames. With a roar, the fire turned emerald green and rose higher than Fred, who stepped right into it, screaming and melting into a pile of ash. I wish that would happen every single time. Every single time they think this would work, this will work. Ah! Like a main character just dies from a mishap. Who stepped right into it, shouted, "Diagon Alley!" and vanished. You must speak clearly, dear," Mrs. Weasley told Harry as George dipped his hands into the flower pot. "And mind, you get out at the right gate." "The right what?" said Harry nervously, as the fire roared and whipped George out of sight too. "Well, there are an awful lot of wizards' fires to choose from, you know, but as long as you've spoken clearly..." "You'll be fine, Molly. Don't fuss," said Mr. Weasley, helping himself to floo powder too.
"But dear, if you got lost, how would we ever explain to his aunt and uncle?"
"They wouldn't mind," Harry reassured her. "Dudley would think it was a brilliant joke if I got lost up a chimney. Don't worry about that." "Well, all right. You go after Arthur," said Mr. Weasley. "Oh,
"Well, all right. You go after Arthur," said Mrs. Weasley. "Now, when you get into the fire, say where you're going, and keep your elbows tucked in," said Ron advised. "And your eyes shut," said Mrs. Weasley. "The soot."
"Don't fidget," said Ron, "or you might well fall out the wrong fireplace."
"But don't panic and get up too early. Wait until you see Fred and George."
Trying hard to bear all this in mind, Harry took a pinch of floo powder and walked to the edge of the fire. He took a deep breath, scattered the powder into the flames, and stepped forward, burning to pieces. The fire felt like a warm breeze. He opened his mouth and immediately swallowed a lot of hot ash. "Diagon Alley!" he coughed. It felt as though he was being sucked down a giant plug hole. He seemed to be spinning very fast. The roaring in his ears was deafening. He tried to keep his eyes open, but the whirl of green flames made him feel sick. Something hard knocked his elbow, and he tucked it in tightly, still spinning and spinning. Now it felt as though cold hands were slapping his face. Squinting through his glasses, he saw a blurred stream of fireplaces and snatched glimpses of the rooms beyond. His bacon sandwiches were churning inside of him. He closed his eyes again, wishing it would stop, and then he fell, face forward, onto cold stone and felt his glasses shatter. No! I actually took the frames out today because it was bugging me. Dizzy and bruised, covered in soot, he got gingerly to his feet, holding his broken glasses up to his eyes. He was quite alone, but where he was, he had no idea. All he could tell was that he was standing in the stone fireplace of what looked like a large, dimly lit wizard's shop. But nothing in here was ever likely to be on a Hogwarts school list. I'm wondering, sorry, what was the bad guy's name in the last book again? Quirrell.
Quirrell, yeah.
Did Harry murder him? Like, what happened to him? Did he get sent to a hospital or is he dead? Did, like, Harry snuff the light from his eyes? What happened?
I don't think it's left clear.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, what's this? A glass case nearby held a withered hand on a cushion, a blood-stained pack of cards, and a staring glass eye. Ooh. Evil-looking masks leered down from the walls. An assortment of human bones lay upon the counter, and rusty, spiked instruments hung from the ceiling. Even worse, the dark, narrow street Harry could see through the dusty shop window was definitely not Diagon Alley. The sooner he got out of here, the better. Nose still stinging where it had hit the earth, Harry made his way swiftly and silently towards the door. But before he got halfway towards it, two people appeared on the other side of the glass. And one of them was the very last person Harry wanted to meet when he was lost, covered in soot and wearing broken glasses. Draco Malfoy. Harry looked quickly around and spotted a large black cabinet to his left. He shot inside it and pulled the doors to, leaving a small crack to peer through. Seconds later, a bell clanged, and Malfoy stepped into the shop. The man who followed could only be his father. Okay, for his father, please give me more adjectives again when we get there. Or now, but so I can read them when we get there. He had the same pale, pointed face and identical cold, gray eyes. Mr. Malfoy crossed the shop, looking lazily at the items on display. Lazily, okay. And rang a bell on the counter before turning to his son and saying, "Nasty, sexy, evil man." Oh, that's good. That's a great... Turning to his son and saying, "Touch nothing, Draco." No, touch nothing, Draco.
Cold, manipulative,
Cold,
aristocratic,
cold.
steely, posh.
Posh, posh. Touch nothing, Draco. Malfoy, who reached for the glass eye, malicious, cruel, cold, and titled. Malfoy, who reached for the glass eye, said, "I thought you were going to buy me a present." "I said I would buy you a racing broom," said his father, drumming his fingers on the counter. "What's the good of that if I'm not on the house team?" said Malfoy, looking sulky and bad-tempered. "Harry Potter got a Nimbus 2000 last year. Special permission from Dumbledore so he could play for Gryffindor. He's not even that good. It's just because he's famous. Famous for having a stupid scar on his forehead." Is that good? Okay. But still kind of hunky. All right. Malfoy bent down to examine a shelf full of skulls. "Everyone thinks he's so smart. Wonderful Potter with his scar and his broomstick. You have told me this at least a dozen times already," said Mr. Malfoy, with a quelling look at his son. "And I would remind you that it is not prudent to appear less than fond of Harry Potter. Not when most of our kind regard him as the hero who made the Dark Lord disappear. Ah, Mr. Borgin." Mr. Borgin, please, some adjectives for him too, whoever that is. A stooping man, okay, stooping, had appeared behind the counter, smoothing his greasy black hair from his face. Okay. "Mr. Malfoy, what a pleasure to see you again." Something like that? He's speaking of your scar, John. Mr. Malfoy, what a pleasure. Mr. Malfoy, what a pleasure seeing you again, said Mr. Borgin in a voice as oily, okay, oily, something like that. Oily. "Delighted, and young Mr. Malfoy too. Charmed. How may I be of assistance? I must show you just in today, and very reasonably priced." "I'm not buying today, Mr. Borgin, but selling," said Mr. Malfoy. "Selling?" The smile faded. "Oh, selling." The smile faded slightly from Mr. George. Squeaky? Sleazy. "You have heard, of course, that the Ministry is conducting more raids," said Mr. Malfoy, taking a roll of parchment from his inside pocket and unraveling it for Mr. Borgin to read. "I have a few items at home that might embarrass me if the Ministry were to call." Mr. Borgin fixed a pair of pince-nez to his nose and looked down the list. "The Ministry wouldn't presume to trouble you, sir, surely?" Mr. Malfoy's lip curled. "I have not been visited yet. The name Malfoy still commands a certain respect. Yet the Ministry grows even more meddlesome. There are rumors about a new Muggle Protection Act. No doubt that flea-bitten, Muggle-loving fool Arthur Weasley's behind it." Kind of like Filch, the hunch. Okay, so let me know if there's anything to fix for that character. Yeah. Harry felt a hot surge of anger, and as you see, certain of these poisons might make it appear. "I understand, sir, of course," said Mr. Borgin. "Let me see." Can I have that? Can I have that?" interrupted Draco, pointing at the withered hand on his cushion. "Ah, the hand of glory," said Mr. Borgin, abandoning Mr. Malfoy's list and scurrying over to Draco. "Insert a candle and it gives light only to the holder. Best friends of thieves and plunderers. Your son's fine taste, sir." "I hope my son will amount to more than a thief or a plunderer, Borgin," said Mr. Malfoy coldly. And Mr. Borgin said quickly, No offence meant." "Though if his school marks don't pick up," said Mr. Malfoy more coldly still.
That may indeed be all he is fit for. It's not my fault, retorted Draco. The teachers all have favorites. That Hermione Granger. I would have thought you'd be ashamed that a girl of no wizard family beat you in every exam, snapped Mr. Malfoy. Ha! Said Harry under his breath, pleased to see Draco looking both abashed and angry. Good too. Prediction showed as a one-man Harry Potter show in 2021. Yeah, maybe. It's the same all over, said Mr. Borgin in his oily voice. Wizard blood is counting for less everywhere. Not with me, said Mr. Malfoy, his long nostrils flaring. No, sir, not with me, sir, said Mr. Borgin with a deep bow. In that case, perhaps we can return to my list, said Mr. Malfoy shortly. I am in something of a hurry, Borgin. I have important business elsewhere today. They started to haggle. Harry watched nervously as Draco drew nearer and nearer to his hiding place, examining the objects for sale. He paused to examine a long coil of hangman's rope and to read, smirking, the card popped on a magnificent necklace of opals. Caution, do not touch, cursed, has claimed the lives of 19 Muggle owners to date. Draco turned away and saw the cabinet right in front of him. He walked forward. He stretched out his hand for the handle. Done, said Mr. Malfoy at the counter. Come, Draco. Harry wiped his forehead on his sleeve as Draco turned away. Good day to you, Mr. Borgin. I'll expect you at the manor tomorrow to pick up the goods. The moment the door had closed, Mr. Borgin dropped his oily manner. Oh. Good day to yourself, Mr. Malfoy. And if the stories are true, you haven't sold me half of what's hidden in your manor. Muttering darkly, Mr. Borgin disappeared into a back room. Harry waited for a minute in case he came back, then, quietly as he could, slipped out of the cabinet, past the glass cases, and out of the shop door. Lucius Malfoy sounded just a bit more annoyed and arrogant. Okay, I'll put some more on that. Cool. Thanks for the feedback. Clutching his broken glasses to his face, he stared around. He had emerged in a dingy alleyway that seemed to be made up entirely of shops devoted to the dark arts. The one he just left, Borgin and Burke's, looked like the largest, but opposite was a nasty window display of shrunken heads. And 2 doors down, a large case was alive with gigantic black spiders. Whew! This is like the black market of Gringotts or something. 2 shabby-looking wizards were watching him from the shadow of a doorway, muttering to each other. Feeling jumpy, Harry set off, trying to hold his glasses on straight and hoping against hope he'd be able to find a way out of there. An old wooden street sign hanging over a shop selling poisonous candles told him he was in Knockturn Alley. This didn't help, as Harry had never heard of such a place. He supposed he hadn't spoken clearly enough through his mouthful of ashes back in Weasley's fire. Trying to stay calm, he wondered what to do. Somebody is speaking in his ear. Not lost, are you, my dear? I'm going to find out who that is. Or you probably already know, so give me some adjectives for whoever that is. Said a voice in his ear, making him jump. An aged witch stood in front of him, holding a tray of what looked horribly like whole human fingernails. She leered at him, showing mossy teeth. Harry backed away. I'm fine, thanks, he said. I'm just... Who said it? Who's saying this? Hagrid, yes, Hagrid's back. Harry, what do you think you're doing down there? Harry's heart leapt. So did the witch. A load of fingernails cascaded down over her feet, and she cursed as the massive form of Hagrid, the Hogwarts gamekeeper, came striding towards them. Beetle black eyes flashing of his great, bristling beard. Hagrid! Harry croaked in relief. I was lost. Floo powder. Hagrid seized Harry by the scruff of the neck and pulled him away from the witch, knocking the tray right out of her hands. Her shrieks followed them all the way along the twisting alleyway, out into bright sunlight. Harry saw a familiar snow-white marble building in the distance, Gringotts Bank. Harry had steered him right into Diagon Alley. You're a mess, said Hagrid gruffly, brushing soot off Harry so forcefully he nearly knocked him into a barrel of dragon dung outside an apothecary. Skulking around Knockturn Alley. I don't know. Dodgy place, Harry. Don't want no one to see you down there. I realize that, said Harry, ducking as Hagrid made to brush him off again. I told you, I was lost. What were you doing down there anyway?
I was looking for a flesh-eating slug repellent, growled Hagrid. They're ruining the school cabbages. You're not on your own.
I'm staying with the Weasleys, but we got separated, Harry explained. I've got to go and find them. They set off together down the street.
How come you never wrote back to me?
said Hagrid as Harry jogged alongside him. He had to take 3 steps to every stride of Hagrid's enormous boots. Harry explained all about Dobby and the Dursleys.
Ruddy muggles, growled Hagrid. If I'd have known.
Harry, over here! Harry looked up and saw Hermione Granger standing at the top of the flight of steps to Gringotts. She ran down to meet them, her bushy brown hair flying behind her. L'Oreal! What happened to your glasses? Hello, Hagrid. Oh, it's wonderful. Hello, Hagrid. Oh, it's wonderful to see you two again. Are you coming into Gringotts, Harry? As soon as I've found the Weasleys, said Harry.
You won't have long to wait,
grinned Hagrid. Harry and Hermione looked around. Sprinting up the crowded street were Ron, Fred, George, Percy, and Mr. Weasley. Hurry, Mr. Weasley panted. We hoped you'd only got one grade too far. He mopped his glistening bald patch. Molly's frantic. She's coming now. Where did you come out? Ron asked. Knockturn Alley, said Harry grimly. Brilliant, said Fred and George together. We've never been allowed in, said Ron enviously.
I should bloody well think not,
growled Hagrid. Mrs. Weasley now came galloping into view, her handbag swinging wildly in one way. Ginny just clinging onto the other. Oh, Harry! Oh, my dear! Oh, you could have been anywhere! Gasping for breath, she pulled a large clothes brush out of her bag and began sweeping up the soot Hagrid hadn't managed to beat away. Oh, that took the breath from me. I'm a bit dizzy doing all those voices. Oh man, I didn't take a break in the middle of that. Wow. Oh, honestly, I got a bit dizzy there. I'm just sitting. I'm out of shape. Oh man. Okay. Gasping for breath, she pulled okay, we already did that.
Well, gotta be off,
said Hagrid, who was having his hand wrung by Mrs. Weasley. Nocturnally! If you hadn't found him, Hagrid.
See you at Hogwarts.
And he strode away, head and shoulders taller than anyone else in the packed street. Guess who I saw in Borgin and Burke's? Harry asked Ron and Hermione as they climbed the Gringotts step. Malfoy and his father.
Did Lucius Malfoy buy anything?
No. Did Lucius Malfoy buy anything? Said Mr. Weasley sharply behind them. No, he was selling.
So, he's worried,
said Mr. Weasley with Mr. Weasley with grim satisfaction.
Oh, I'd love to get Lucius Malfoy for something.
You be careful, Arthur, said Mrs. Weasley sharply as they were ushered into the bank by a bowing goblin at the door. That family's trouble. Don't go biting off more than you can chew. So you don't think I'm a match for Lucius Malfoy, said Mr. Weasley indignantly. But he was distracted almost at once by the sight of Hermione's parents. Oh, great! Who were standing nervously at the counter that ran along the great marble wall, waiting for Hermione to introduce them. Okay, I got 2 minutes left. Some adjectives for the parents of Hermione, please. But you're muggles, said Mr. Weasley delightedly. We must have a drink. What's that you've got there? Oh, you're changing muggle money. Molly, look. He pointed excitedly at the 10-pound notes in Mr. Granger's hand. Meet you back here, Ron said to Hermione, as the Weasleys and Harry were led off to their underground vaults by another Gringotts goblin. The vaults were reached by means of small, goblin-driven carts that sped along miniature train tracks through the bank's underground tunnels. Harry enjoyed the breakneck journey down to the Weasleys' vault, but felt dreadful, far worse than he had in Knockturn Alley when it was opened. There was a very small pile of silver sickles inside, and just one gold galleon. Mrs. Weasley felt right into the corners before sweeping the whole lot into her bag. Harry felt even worse when they reached his vault.
He tried to block the contents from view as he hastily shoved handfuls of coins into a leather bag. Back outside on the marble steps, they all separated. Percy muttered vaguely about needing a new quill. Fred and George had spotted their friends from Hogwarts, Lee Jordan. Mrs. Weasley and Ginny were going to a second-hand robe shop. Mr. Weasley was insisting on taking the Grangers off to the Leaky Cauldron for a drink. All right, that's where I'll end for today. That was fun. It was hard. I don't know. There's going to be new students for sure. The parents, I don't know how I'm going to keep these all separate, or if they'll even be separate enough. There's probably going to be characters that seem like the others. But it's fun. You know, whenever I do this, my hands look giant. They look like Hagrid's hand. Okay. Any questions? Any insights you have? Yeah, I'm glad that there's another subsection. That whole city, Gringotts, there's probably going to be 2 or 3 other.
Gringotts is just the bank.
Oh, that's just the bank. What is that location called then?
Diagon Alley.
But that black marketplace is not Diagon Alley.
Right.
So what's the city that they all Diagon Alley and everything's part of? That's what I want to know.
I'm not sure.
Do you want to tell us if they need voices? Because most don't. Nah, I want to give them voices. It's funner that way. Thanks, Kenton. Appreciate. While whatever questions are coming up, at the sorry, what was that? Ron and Harry sound distinct to me. Nice work. Oh, good. After this, at 7 o'clock, Vancouver Theatre. At 7:30, Vancouver Theatre Sports is having a stream. It's comedy. Follow Mark at yoc.creations. He's helping me out here. He's very creative. He does a lot of creative projects. Cool stuff on there. Byron is reading noble.byron or Noble Byron, his account. He's reading Game of Thrones at 7 o'clock. So you can also follow that for him. And I also have a production company with a couple of my friends. It's called Cave Cannon Productions. Give us a follow because we do other stuff than this as well. Okay, let's see what you wrote down. Since we're all doing it in London. Diagon Alley is the marketplace. The black market is in there just down a shady part of downtown. So what's the... It's London. Okay, it's London. Oh, right. So it's just the hidden magical parts of London. Okay, that makes more sense because I was thinking, where are they going in the world? Does anybody know where Hogwarts is situated in London? Or in England, I guess? Or Great Britain? That'd be cool to know. Yeah, there, whatever Ken wrote down there. Cave Cannon Productions. Yeah, give us a follow. Okay, the first 2 chapters when it was at Privet Drive, I was like, yeah, this is fun. This is nothing really new. I know he's gonna be mishandled, except for Dobby. Dobby was fun, but now I'm getting into having a lot more fun again. I don't know if you can tell that within my reading, where I'm like, let's get this out of the way so we can get to the fun stuff. I'm still trying to make it engaging and active. We can tell you that's a spoiler. Okay, cool. Hogwarts. It's at Hogwarts, Scotland. All right, everybody. I will see you tomorrow again at 6 o'clock. If you want to catch up on any of these, go on my account, go to YouTube. You can subscribe there. And again, this is a great part of my day. I don't know about you, but I'm finding it, harder and harder somehow to deal with this doing nothing inside all the time. I want to go out and see my friends, and so this is a great time to connect with people, to connect with all of you, and have fun. It's a good part of my day. All right, everybody. See you later. Bye from Mark. Bye from Dexter. Hope you have a great date until tomorrow. Bye-bye.